Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary, and today's video is going to be my November wrap-up part 1. So in the month of November, I actually participated in Nonfiction November, and I wound up reading a lot of nonfiction books, but I also got through quite a few fiction books as well. So this is going to be the fiction book portion of my November wrap-up, and I'll do a separate video where I discuss my nonfiction books. As usual, I'm just going to start this video off with some of my reading stats for the month of November, and these reading stats again will only cover the fiction books that I read. I keep wanting to say the non-fiction books, but that's unnecessary. So as I mentioned, I read 14 fictional books in the month of November for a total of 5,029 pages. I read from 10 female and 4 male authors. I read from 11 white authors and 3 non-Black POC authors. And I read fiction books published in 1817, 1 published in 1968, 2 published in 2001, 1 published in 2009, 1 published in 2015, 1 published in 2016, 2 books published in 2019, 1 book published in 2020, and 4 books published in 2021. I read 4 fantasies, 3 contemporary romance, 2 mystery/thrillers, 2 historical fiction, 1 classic, 1 horror, and 1 general fiction/literary fiction. I read 0 middle grade books, 2 young adult books, and 12 adult books. I read 1 1-star, 1 2-star, 4 3-stars, 6 4-stars, and 2 5-star books for an average of 3.5 stars. I did read 1 graphic novel, and the rest were all traditionally published novels. I read 4 ebooks. I listened to 8 books via audio. I read 1 book physically, and I also did a combination of listening to the audiobook and reading physically 1 book. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the books that I read in November. So the first fiction book that I read in the month of November was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. And this is a mystery thriller following a man who works in this mental hospital. There is an artist in this hospital who killed her husband and then hasn't spoken a word since. And so his job is basically to be her psychotherapist. I did not see the twist in this coming. This is a very, very good book. I think I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed my time reading this one. I also read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides earlier this year, and I actually really didn't like that book. So I was hesitant to go into this one, but both my mom and my sister loved this book, and they recommended it to me. So I read it as well. I listened to this one primarily as an audiobook while I was in Connecticut, and I would highly recommend this one. I really enjoyed it. The next fiction book that I finished, I also listened to as an audiobook, I think, or did I read it as an ebook? I can't remember, but I don't have a physical copy of it. And that is Sons and Daughters of Ease and Plenty by Ramona Acebo. I don't know how her name is pronounced, but this book basically follows this wealthy family after they find out that they are going to lose their inheritance, essentially, or they've run out of family money. And it's this couple, and they have 2 children, and what happens is both parents leave. And I think one of the parents leaves a note behind, and the other parent doesn't leave any note behind because the father thinks that the wife will be home with the kids, and she'll recognize that he's not coming back, and she'll call him and get in touch with him. And he goes on a trip with his lover, and she decides she needs to take some time for herself. She's been a mother for this long, so she leaves as well. And so we follow the husband's perspective, the wife's perspective, and we also follow the perspective of the 2 children who are left to their own devices. This book was really interesting. It was kind of it wasn't very exciting, I would say, but it was a very interesting look into the lives of others. Also, it was an interesting look into discovering that you are your own person after you have children, which I think was part of the point. But I did enjoy my time reading this. I gave it 4 stars. I can't remember that much in detail about the plot, but I do remember really liking the way that it was written and liking the ideas that were expressed. Then I read The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward, which is a horror thriller book following a couple of different perspectives. The first perspective is a man named Ted who lives in this house on Needless Street and just his day-to-day life. Ted is a very interesting character, and he's very mysterious and kind of dark-leaning. And then we also follow the perspective of a woman whose name I can't remember, but when she was a child, her sister went missing and was presumed to have been murdered or kidnapped while her and her family were on this lake trip I think they're in Oregon or Washington State. I cannot remember exactly where it is. So we follow her perspective, and she's trying to figure out what happened to her sister all those years ago. This has been like 17 years ago or something like that. We also get the perspective of a cat that lives in Ted's house. I think her name was Victoria, but I could be wrong about that. This book was a wild ride. I don't want to really give too much away because I think it would spoil it, but you have to read this book. If you read nothing else that I recommend all year, I give this book 5 stars. It's one of my favorite books that I read this year, but I feel like if I talk too much about it, I will ruin it, but it was so good. So good. The next book that I read was kind of a disappointment to me, and it was Behind the Red Door by Megan Collins. And this is another mystery thriller, and we're following Fern Douglas, who is now married and an adult woman living somewhere. I think she lives in Boston or the Boston area with her husband, and she's a school psychologist. But she sees this newspaper article about a woman who was kidnapped when she was a child in a town near where Fern grew up. And the woman was kidnapped when she was a kid, and she's now gone missing again right after writing a book about being kidnapped. And for some reason, Fern thinks that she knew this woman when they were kids. And so she goes back to her hometown where her abusive father lives. And I think his name is also Ted. And her name is Fern. And the main character of Sons and Daughters of Ease and Plenty is also named Fern. So I read a lot of books with characters with the same name, which I thought was interesting. But anyways, that's not really the point. But her dad's name is Ted. And we find out all about his like psychological abuses of her because he studies fear and fear's effects on people and especially children. That's like his life's work. He was a professor studying fear, and he would put Fern through all of these experiments. Like one time he and his wife just left the house and convinced Fern that they weren't coming back for her, but really they just watched her like unravel. So there's all sorts of like really messed up stuff happening to her as a kid. And that was one of the problems that I had with this book. So purportedly the reason for Fern's returning is because her dad is moving out of the house and he needs someone to pack up all of his stuff and help him move. My thing, maybe I'm just a very unforgiving person, but I cannot imagine escaping a situation like Fern's childhood, making it into adulthood, studying psychology on my own, seeing that what my parent did to me was so messed up, and then returning to them. And I know that there's like a cycle of abuse thing happening and the desire for a child to want to be loved and respected and like adored by their parent. But I just didn't get her motivations for moving back. Ted didn't seem like something like a situation I would want to put myself in. And I also, I guess, just didn't really understand. I just didn't get Fern's motivations as a character. I didn't buy into them. So everything that happened made sense, but also I called the twist, if you will, at the very beginning. Like it was my first thought that this thing that happened must have been this thing. I don't want to give it away, obviously, but if you've read this, let me know if you also thought it was really obvious. I give that one 2 stars. It just didn't hit, you know? The next book I read was part of my Jane Austen buddy read that I'm doing all year. You still have time to join us for our last one. Our last live show will be at the beginning of January sometime. I haven't really picked out when. We will be discussing Persuasion. If you would like to join us, please feel free. But I read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was fine, but nothing in it stuck out to me. I don't remember any of the characters' names. I vaguely remember what happened. We essentially follow this main character who gets invited by her neighbor to go to Bath, which is like, and be introduced into society. So she's going purportedly to like kind of find a husband, but also to just like get introduced to people because it's how people met people back then. And this is Jane Austen's take on like a satirical gothic tale. My biggest complaint about this book is that it's called Northanger Abbey and it's supposed to be this satire of gothic literature, but I didn't really feel like any of it was very gothic. Like, if it's going to be a gothic satire, I want it to sort of feel like a gothic with some, like, other ploys. Like, I understand after reading it what was satirical, and I've looked up a few things of people talking about it, but this was not my favorite Jane Austen that I've read. It was just kind of meh for me. I feel like where Jane Austen shines for me is the romances. So this one and also Mansfield Park, I just didn't really care as much about. But that's sort of my review of this, I guess. The next few books that I read, I actually read as a part of a reading blog, so I'm not going to talk about them here, but I read Dead Until Dark by Charlene Harris, which is the first in a paranormal romance series, and I also read True Grit by Charles Portis. I will link that reading blog. I was reading books by authors from Arkansas, if you want to read it. I really enjoyed doing that project. If you don't know, I live in Arkansas, and I'm going to move away from Arkansas fairly soon, so I'm going to miss it. But I just wanted to give a little bit of love to some Arkansan authors. So I would really love it if you checked out that video. I worked really hard on it, and I think it was really fun. Then I listened to A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas on audio. And I'm sure everyone knows what this is. This is like a booktube darling type of book. But this follows Feyre, who is a huntress. But at the beginning of this book, Feyre is hunting, and she she purposely kills a wolf, but she doesn't know that it was a fairy. And then she gets taken away to go to the fairy kingdom to serve out her sentence for killing this wolf. And it's very much a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so a lot of those tropes, like Stockholm Syndrome, but she ends up falling in love with this fairy king named Tamlin. And there's a lot of other stuff happening after the initial Beauty and the Beast stuff. I will say that this had so much of, like, I heard it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I feel like people had said that it wasn't very much like Beauty and the Beast. And the story does go in a different direction, but like a lot of the things that I remember from the Disney movie of Beauty and the Beast were in this. Like there's a scene where Tamlin is hurt and Feyre has to like wrap his arm up, kind of like that scene in Beauty and the Beast where he gets attacked by the wolves, saving Belle. I don't know if I should have been more specific with that. So I thought that was really interesting. I really, really enjoyed this. I already know some spoilers for the rest of the series. So going into this, I sort of knew some things were going to change in the other books, but I'm really curious to see how that happens. And if you caught my December TBR, I will be continuing the series in December, and I'm very excited to do so. The next thing that I read was an ebook copy of Witchy by Ariel Rissette, which I've found out is not a complete graphic novel. It's not listed as part of a series, but it ends on a cliffhanger. I'm not a big graphic novel person. If I read a graphic novel, I feel like I want it to be complete. And I don't really like cliffhangers. It's the same reason I never really liked a lot of cartoons, or like, I've never really gotten into like anime or a lot of cartoons because I feel like I want my TV episodes, I guess just for cartoons, I just want it to feel like it's one thing on its own. I don't really want to have to watch a whole season I just don't think of it the same way that I think of books. It's definitely a me thing. I'm not saying that comics aren't books. I'm not saying that graphic novels aren't books, because I think they are. They count towards reading. And if you like them, I think that's great, but I've been trying to get into more and more of them, and the more I read, the more I realize that what I want is often not what graphic novels are. So Witchy follows this girl who lives in this world where there's magic, and she goes to this magic school, but the premise of the book is that your magical abilities are directly tied to the length of your hair. And so her dad had really, 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 really long hair, so he was a very powerful witch, and he was killed for having too much power. So the main character of Witchy has inherited his really long hair, but she enchants it to be shorter so that people don't know that she's very powerful, and she doesn't feel very powerful. So this has a bit of a magic school setting, and then it quickly sort of diverts from that. There's also a elite group of warriors, if you will. They work for the government, and it's the more powerful witches can go work for them. I liked the art style. I liked the concept. I feel like if it was a completed work, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But I like things that have a concrete ending. Even if it's just like a part of a series where you know that there's more to be like said and done, I still want like something to sort of resolve. And this one felt like it resolved, and then she added a few extra panels to get you excited for the next edition or the next volume. And I believe this was originally a webcomic with like scenes published weekly or something. So it makes sense. I just felt like I feel like I wish that the volume ended a little earlier than it did, or extended a little longer than it did, so that it could have felt more complete. Then I read The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang, and I'm saving this for my review of the 5-star prediction books that I read. So I will just briefly tell you what it was about, but I'm not going to tell you what I rated it. This is the third installment of the Kiss Quotient series of standalones by Helen Hoang. I've now read all of them. I really enjoy this series. They all feature main characters who are on the autism spectrum, and in this one we follow Anna, who is a professional violinist, And we actually get to see her get diagnosed with autism as an adult, because a lot of women do not get diagnosed as children because autism presents so differently in girls compared to boys. And I feel like when you think of autism, you think of the way that boys with autism display their autism. And I really loved the way that that was described in here. She's also in a long-term relationship with this man. I think his name is Julian, but I could be wrong. But he decides that he wants to marry her, but not yet, because he wants to date other women because he feels like he hasn't dated enough, so he wants to open their relationship. And sort of as revenge, she decides to start dating other men, and she sets up an online dating profile to have a one-night stand. And then we get reintroduced to Quan, who has been featured in the other books. So a lot of people were really excited about this because Quan is going to be in it. Again, I'm not going to tell you what my overall rating was, but it's a very cute love story between them. And it also deals really heavily. This one I felt like dealt really heavily with grappling with understanding your autism. So then I read another contemporary romance. I was trying to read a few books that were nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards so that I would be better equipped at voting in them, because I did not read a lot of new releases this year, I found out. But I read People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I was really looking forward to this book because I read Beach Read. I read Beach Read in the summer, and I really enjoyed that book. And I like that she writes romances with a really heavy emotional weight to them, but the emotional weight doesn't come from the relationship between the characters. It comes from characters' own lives and grappling with that in addition to being in a relationship. And so I had really high hopes for People We Meet on Vacation. I also really loved the concept. It follows two best friends from college who every year go on this annual trip. One of the friends is now a travel vlogger or blogger, I don't know which one. And the other one is a teacher back in their hometown. And they, for whatever reason at the beginning of this book, haven't spoken in a few years because something happened on one of their previous trips. So throughout this book, she's planning on going on this one last trip with her childhood best friend, or college best friend, I think. And you're also getting flashbacks to all of their other trips to see how their relationship has been over the years, which I really enjoyed that part of it, but I did feel like it kind of messed up the pacing of the actual plot. I don't know how I could have made it flow better or how the editors could have made it flow better, but for me it felt a little disjointed. Also, I liked both of the characters individually, but I didn't really care about them getting together because it took so long to happen. If you're a fan of a really slow burn, you might enjoy this, but I felt like it took forever for anything to really happen between the characters. And then even when it did, it kind of felt lackluster. I think I gave it 3 stars actually, and I said it was a 3.5. I'm remembering now. Because there are parts of this book that I absolutely loved, and I teared up at a time. I thought it was really emotional. I felt really invested in the characters. But overall, the book just didn't work for me. So it was like all of the pieces were there, but the overall thing just didn't pan out for me personally. I also read in November Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, because I'm currently doing a read of the Cosmere in publication date order, so I'll try to remember to leave the link down below to the order that I'm following, but I think it's from Brandon Sanderson's website or a website specifically for Brandon Sanderson books. I don't really know, but essentially it has a bunch of different orders you can read the books in, and I've chosen to do publication date order. That way I never get out of order, no matter how many more books come out, because I'll just read them in the order that they come out. If that makes sense, that was my thought process behind it. But Warbreaker is directly after the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy. And it's a standalone fantasy set in this world where the magic system revolves around colors and having control over colors. And colors and having control over colors comes from having breaths. It's never really fully explained unless it is, and I'm just stupid. I listened to this as an audiobook. My library has what's called, gosh, I'm not going to be able to remember, graphic movie or something. And it's supposed to be a movie in your brain. So there's sound effects and voice actors and all sorts of stuff going on. I liked listening to it that way. I didn't dislike it, but I also like to speed up my audiobooks, and I feel like certain parts of it sounded kind of weird, sped up, songs and stuff. So if you don't like that kind of thing, obviously I wouldn't recommend this for you, but I really enjoyed that way of experiencing the story. However, I still thought the story was just kind of meh for me. I don't know. I wasn't ever really super into it. We followed 2 sisters, and one of the sisters is, they're both the princesses of this neighboring kingdom from the main kingdom that we're focusing on. And the older princess was raised her whole life that she was going to marry the king, who's a god on earth of this other kingdom. But her dad and her have really bonded, and he feels bad sending her to marry this god king, so he sends his younger daughter, who has not been trained to do anything, instead. And that was, like, really weird for me, just because, like, I don't know, seeing that blatant favoritism with a parent and their kids, I don't like, personally. Maybe I just like to believe that my parents love me and my siblings all equally, but I could be wrong about that. I don't know. Mom, let me know. But that's sort of what kickstarts it, and then the older sister inevitably feels bad that her younger sister has been sent to what she deems a horrible fate, and she tries to sneak into the other city to, like, rescue her. I didn't dislike it at all, but I just don't really feel like it was super memorable to me. But yes, I did read that. I did give that 3 stars. And then I read The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, and this I liked. Tentatively. I thought it was fine. I think I gave it 3 stars. Oh, I gave it 4 stars. I was very conflicted on this one because, again, it had parts that I really, really enjoyed. This follows a character that when he's a young boy, we sort of follow him throughout a lot of his life, and it's set during the Spanish Civil War or just after. My Spanish history is not very, up to par, but I think it's in, like, the 30s and 40s is when this is set, and 50s maybe even. But the young boy, when he's, like, 12, I think, his dad takes him to this place called the Cemetery of Lost Books, and he finds this copy of The Shadow of the Wind by this author who, all of the author's works have been, like, burned, and so now they're all really rare, and he finds this copy of The Shadow of the Wind, and there's, like, a creepy man who uses the name of a character from one of the books, and he's the one who's purportedly burning all of these books, but nobody really knows very much about him. So it's about this character growing up, and throughout his whole life, he's just sort of obsessed with this book and the author of it and figuring out the mystery behind it. So a lot of it has to do with that. As you can probably tell, I did not retain very much of this book. I did listen to it as an audiobook, which I think may have done me a disservice because I feel like a lot of it I needed to, like, focus on. But overall, I liked a lot of the ideas in here. I liked the twists that came from it. It's sort of like a historical thriller-esque because there's like a mystery element. It's more of a historical mystery, but there are definitely, like, twists and turns like you would expect in a thriller. So I did enjoy this, but it also kind of reminded me of the book Night Film by Marisha Pessl. Is that her name? A lot of people love that book. I think if you liked that, and the way that that book incorporated bits from the movie of that, like, film director who makes, like, these creepy horror films, I think if you liked that aspect of that, you would really enjoy this. That was my favorite part of that book, and that was also my favorite part of this book. I just felt like overall it wasn't totally my favorite thing in the world, but I did enjoy it, and I do plan on continuing in this series. And then the last fiction book that I read in the month of November was Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. Again, because I was trying to read some of the books that were nominated for Goodreads Choice Awards. This is the third in a series of standalone romances. I really didn't like the first one in this book, which is called The Friend Zone. I really enjoyed the second one, which is Head Over Heels, I think? No. What is the second one? The second one's about the girl who finds the musician's dog, and it's their love story, and I liked that one a lot. This one is following, I can't remember how the guy is related to, he's someone's cousin. One of, like, the male character's cousins. And it's his romance with this woman that lives next door to him in this apartment building in Minnesota. And the woman is a YouTuber, which the way they described her being a YouTuber, I thought was really annoying. Again, she's a travel vlogger, but she recently has come to adopt this baby. I don't even think she really adopted it. She's just become the guardian because her sister is an addict and had this kid and can't take care of it. So she asks her sister, who is the main character of this book, to take care of the kid. Also, the main character of the book has, like, a really high likelihood of getting ALS, which is, like, a muscle deterioration disease. And she's convinced that she has it. So you're dealing with that a lot of the time. But this, again, kind of used the miscommunication trope, but it was really just the, like, leaving things out trope. So these two people start this relationship, and neither of them is really looking for anything because he just got dumped by his girlfriend who turns out was married. And so it's just all of this, like, drama sort of happening in their personal lives. But what I gave this book 2 stars because I didn't like the way the characters were. I don't think Abby Jimenez is really an author for me. I've enjoyed one of the 3 books of hers that I've read, so I don't think I'm going to try to read anything else by her. And even the one that I read wasn't my favorite. I just thought it was fine. Actually, I think I gave it 4 stars. I think I liked it, but I thought it was cute. This one I didn't really think was cute. The YouTuber stuff really annoyed me, especially because the character was a YouTuber, and so much of her life was online. She just assumed that this man knew about it and didn't tell him things that I feel like are really important to know. Also, there's a whole scene where he throws her a surprise birthday party, but he invites his cousin and his wife, who is one of the couples in the book, and then that cousin's best friend and his wife, who is another one of the couples in the books. And, like, she'd never met them. Like, I would feel weird if my boyfriend threw me a surprise party that was purportedly, like, my surprise party for my birthday and didn't invite anyone I knew. That's not for you. I know that the author did that so that she could incorporate those characters, but it just fell really flat for me. It got on my nerves. So I gave this book 2 stars. I almost didn't finish it, which I don't do that often, but I also DNF'd another book this month, which I guess I can talk about after this, but I almost didn't finish it because I was just so frustrated with the way things were being handled. So that one I do not recommend. Gave it 2 stars. I gave it 1 star. Yeah, I really didn't like it. I wish I DNF'd it. I ended up just skimming to the end to see how they would resolve things. Because, romances sort of have to have a happily ever after. And it resolved it exactly as I thought things would go. But it was just frustrating to read the fact that, like, the main character, I feel like I can't say anything without spoiling it. So I'm not going to, but I did write, like, spoilers in my review. But the gist of what frustrated me was the main character the female main character did not tell the male main character certain things about her life and, like, her illness and her likelihood of having it. She just expected him to know. And she'd said other things about that on her channel that she also expected him to know. And so when they entered into their, like, actual relationship and they decided to become a partnership and, like, actually date, she thought he knew all this stuff about her. And then when he found out and was, like, kind of rightfully not mad, but, like, confused and wanted some, like, time to think about what he was doing with his life, she got upset with him, which I don't think was fair, personally. The other book that I DNF'd was Smoke City by Keith Rawson. This is a fantasy book, kind of. It's, like, got ghosts in it, and it's got, like, alternate history stuff. So it's about this guy who's he's the reincarnation of the guy who lit the pyre on Joan of Arc's deathbed. And this book, I wanted to read it because it was supposed to be not a Joan of Arc retelling per se, but, like, a reimagining of if Joan of Arc and this guy who killed her constantly were reincarnated, what, like, them interacting in, like, the present day would be like, sort of. But overall, it was just about, there was another guy in it who just was kind of a, like, crappy character, and he was just very much a, like, poor me guy, and I feel like that's just a character that I don't want to read about. So this wasn't it for me. I DNF'd it at, like, 100 pages. 83 pages. Wasn't for me. Not going to read it. So that's it. Those are the 14 plus 1 DNF books that I read in the month of November that were not nonfiction. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving me a like. If you would like to, you can also subscribe to my channel because I do post 2 videos every single week, and my next video will be my nonfiction November wrap-up, and I hope to see you there. Bye!